That'll help if we unmute ourselves. Everybody, thank you so much for joining today. Apologies for the late start here. We had a couple of technical difficulties getting this stream posted up to LinkedIn, so we are now going live on YouTube. I'm going to give everybody just 1 or 2 more minutes to make sure everybody who is on LinkedIn is over here now in YouTube. So bear with us just for 1 more moment and we will get started momentarily. Okay, and welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Apologies for the late start here. Some technical difficulties getting loaded up on LinkedIn, but here we are on YouTube, and hopefully it'll be a great experience from here. So again, thank you so much for all joining us today for our speaker series, Talking to Leaders in Legal. My name is Alex Sappington. I'm the co-CEO of PageVault and the moderator for our discussion today on this really important topic of admissible online evidence collection. I'm here with 3 esteemed panelists. I'll have them introduce themselves in a bit more depth shortly, but they are Wendy Davis, litigation paralegal at Stokes Lawrence out of Seattle, Chris Bojar, the Director of E-Discovery and Litigation Support at Barak Farazano out of Chicago, and Warren Singh, the Supervisor of Practice Technology Consulting at Latham & Watkins out of New York City. So a big thank you to all of you for sharing your knowledge and insights with us. Would like to make the disclaimer up front that whatever we discuss today does not constitute legal advice and is solely the view of these individuals and not their respective law firms. And also a note to our audience watching live on YouTube, please feel free to drop any questions into the chat as you're listening. We should have some time at the end to get the perspective of the panelists on those questions as well. So we are here today to talk about evidence that's found online, and importantly, collecting and preserving it in a way that ensures that the evidence can be admitted in court. We're all living our lives online more and more these days. For example, a recent study showed that 81% of the United States actively uses social media with an average of 7 social media accounts per person. Businesses are also doubling down on their online presence through complex websites, video content, social channels. And so, of course, there's been a natural explosion in the amount of online material that's relevant to litigation cases and can be used as evidence, whether it's an infringed trademark on a website or a damaging Facebook post in an employment matter. But how should legal teams go about capturing that evidence so it can be used as part of their cases? Well, turns out law firms are getting this wrong all the time and are paying the price. There have been a surprising number of cases over the last few years where attorneys have chosen to submit a simple screenshot of a critical piece of evidence, only to have it get tossed out and ruled inadmissible by the court because it wasn't properly authenticated. Our panelists here have all helped their firms avoid embarrassing outcomes like these over the years. They collectively have 75 years of experience in the legal industry, which is truly shocking to me since none of them look a day over 30. And we're thrilled to have them here sharing some best practices and tips and tricks with us today. So to kick us off, please tell us just a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and maybe just so everyone has the full context here, an example of when online evidence was important for you in a case. Maybe Chris, we can start with you.
Great. Yeah, thanks for having us, Alex. This is an important topic that we're dealing with on an almost daily basis, so happy to join and give some thoughts. As Alex mentioned, I run the litigation support department at, and I make the joke, but it worked out anyways, Alex. It's technically Barack Verrazano, and I think once President Obama was elected, it became Barack Verrazano. So we have this, Peter Barack does not look like President Obama, but it's a fun coin flip. Anyways, all joking aside, I run the litigation support department. So we use PageVault a fair amount to collect online evidence. And in fact, the first time we used PageVault, I think is a good way to say this is a nice entree into using it. We had a dispute with between two companies where one company said they were number one at something and then said that they never claimed they were number one at that. And we used PageVault to capture their Twitter account, where it said right on the top, we are number one in this. And so we submitted that as a part of some of the things that we filed, and that case went away pretty fast. So again, it's kind of a simple win. Well, I shouldn't say simple. It's a win, but it was like a totally effective way of using PageVault and to refute what the other side was saying. And, it had the authentication and they bought it, and obviously their Twitter account changed the next day, which was kind of funny because when we submitted it, obviously it was up there, and then they changed the next day and tried to back out of it, but we had already collected the evidence. So I think that's a good victory for PageVault. And I'll put the disclaimer, like I said before we started, I wish this was my online background of my house, but it is not. It's just a canned one. And pass it over to Warren or Wendy.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Wendy, you want to maybe jump in next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Wendy Davis with Stokes Lawrence. I'm a litigation paralegal. I've been doing this for 30 plus years now. I work mostly in IP litigation, employment litigation, and trust and estate litigation. We've been using PageVault for several years now. Collecting the evidence when it's available and live is very important, and oftentimes that's in the very early portion of a case. Litigation's just getting started. Maybe you haven't had discovery issued yet, but you need to secure your evidence that's online. Things change every day, and so a large part of what I do is going out, finding where the evidence lies, collecting entire websites for companies, social media accounts, and a lot of that is oftentimes dynamic, videos, audio, scrolling panels across websites. So, getting your feet in there early and getting the evidence before it's either taken down or it has changed is very important. So, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, a lot of good threads to pull on there throughout the discussion. Warren, bring us home.
Yeah, thank you. And so, like Chris and Wendy, I think our experiences are very similar. So we run the gamut of a bunch of different practice areas, from IP to securities, antitrust, especially here out of our DC office. And for us, it's pre-litigation. You're in the middle, or even right during depositions where people are making claims that you now have a chance to talk to your adversary direct. And sometimes you'll find that what they're saying in the deposition doesn't line up with what they actually have posted. People tend to forget what they posted historically on social media. Like you mentioned, Alex, people have several different accounts, and so you'll find that people don't recall that they've either made statements or have made statements under another alias. Those have been fun when we've seen and rooted out things like that. So for us, I've always found that interesting when we don't include, say, social media as part of our document demand. And then our side loves to go and do those investigations, find out things about your adversary, and then be able to present that in a production to your adversary. It's always fun when you're able to find kind of a smoking gun and counter any things that may have come up during the pretrial process.
Yeah, great. Do you have any of those smoking gun examples or anything to share, the specifics of where this might have been helpful?
So, in our white collar investigations, those are always interesting because you'll find it's funny when the most powerful people that we end up representing, either for our own clients or even for the adversary, you'll be able to either find if someone's perjuring themselves or corroborating exactly what they're saying, and people tend to forget, with the amount of data that we generate, through our personal and corporate systems, how much information is really out there, and a good case team will include or should include social media as part of that. And you'll find we've had to update our data identification templates to include everything by name, because if you generalize things by saying social media, there's so many different platforms out there that people don't automatically align as a social media platform. You think of Twitter, you think of Facebook, but there's so much out there. So it's been interesting how much we've been able to kind of surface things to the top a lot sooner than waiting for the thirst of discovery to find out.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Well, thank you all. And thank you again for being here. First kind of meaty question for you. At a high level, could you just describe your overall process for identifying, collecting, and using online evidence? And then in particular, kind of the role that you or your specific department plays along that chain of events. Whoever wants to kick us off here, I'm sure we'll have some similarities and differences across the three firms.
I'm happy to get
Perfect.
started. It's kind of as an overview. Determining when we are going to be collecting online evidence is dependent on the nature of your case, and between employment, complex corporate litigation. Early on, we identify where that information may lie, and then come up with a game plan. And as I spoke to earlier, it's always important to do it early, do it often, and do it right. I generally will have a meeting with our trial team, and we will decide to what extent we're going to be doing a collection, where we're going to be looking. And then I go in and I start taking a look and seeing how complex this is going to be. What's the dynamic nature of the websites, what type of social media accounts are up to, how active they are. In thinking about some things that we did in the past on cases that turned out to be very, very important, and I can't get into all of the details, but a particular case, a plaintiff was claiming that she was not able to get out and about because of some of the issues that she was dealing with because of the actions of a company. And I was able to get into her Facebook account and found that she was quite a social person, out and about, and she was checking in at bars, she was checking in at different places, at events, at concerts, and I knew that right away we would have to get in and get this information, and we did it very quickly. One of the other processes is the volume that you're going to be collecting. An entire website is going to make it, and we can talk about that later, but make a determination. Is this something that I can do on my own manually right now? Does it make financial sense to the client, or is it something we need to pass back to Page Vault to do a collection? And so from there, we start collecting. And again, this isn't just a one and done. This is what's really key and important on the in the early part of litigation, pre-litigation, and then you're going to continue doing that throughout litigation, seeing how things have come in that's new, and maybe online evidence that has changed. You can make sure and document that as well.
Right. Interesting. And then what do you do with it once you have it? Do you store it somewhere? Do you analyze it?
Well, it depends on the nature of the case. If we're just saving an entire website because we know it's going to be taken down, we do a preservation collection and we hang on to it. If it is more of a gotcha moment, that's when we grab all of the information, and maybe then that's going to influence our discovery that we issue to the other side, because we know what we've got in our back pocket and we've seen it. And so there's a little bit more involvement on that end. And then sometimes it's just, defending ourselves, what was on a website, what it looked like, making sure that you've got all of the little key pieces of information on a website. Oftentimes there's lots of terms and conditions or disclaimers that may be dynamic, and being able to have that information, and then briefing the trial team as far as what all we have, and thinking critically and forward thinking of how this may help them in briefing down the line. Again, like I referenced, in issuing discovery requests to the other side, you may have an entire section of requests and questions about what was out there at one point in time. So making sure our trial team, everybody's aware of what's been collected, what the content it is, and maybe some points on it.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that. I love the do it early, do it often, and do it right. That's a good tagline for this. Fantastic. Chris or Warren, anything that you'd call out as particularly different in the process that you use, or largely the same?
Yeah, I wouldn't say different, but for us, I think first and foremost, which was different for me at this particular firm. I've been at Latham now for about 12 years, and prior to that, I was at another law firm or two. And the one difference between the two was we are not allowed to collect data ourselves, and that for me, that was something new. As someone who's been in support, and the on-demand requests, and as Wendy talked about, the timing, you have people posting things that you can't take a chance that they're going to take back down, or things like that. So time is of the essence. So for us, it was seen as such an impediment to not being able to collect data ourselves. But the stance is that we don't want to be a part of the chain of custody. And have that, and have our our team on the stand to authenticate or describe, just be a part of that. And it not only is it's a distraction to the overall issues at the case, but it can be done improperly. So if it's not done right, and you've ruined that one chance to collect data, you could have things just not be included anymore. So for us, it's worked out well now that using tools like Page Vault, that we've been able to not remove the issues of timing, and having that ability to be able to authenticate, and without distraction. So it's in that respect that was the kind of starting focus for us.
Yeah. Perfect. No, that's great. I would definitely love to come back to some of those issues around chain of custody, how, tools like Page Vault have been able to help you get around those. But first, Chris, any other, just before we dive into some of the specifics around these collections, any other comments or thoughts on the overall process that you all follow?
Yeah, no, and Wendy and Warren bring up good points. I mean, I think and I think Warren said it at the top of his remarks, where you see the other side's document requests, and again, no actual legal advice on how to handle this, but what they're asking for and what they're giving gives you kind of a state of play of whether they're going to use similar tools like Page Vault and be able to follow all of the procedures. And I find, I mean, it's all tactical, I think, on how you want to handle it, but I find showing that we're going to do things properly and getting that out on the front end has been helpful in cases, because then the other side is on notice. And I think as you do that, as you're presenting proper evidence, and they're sending you sort of snippets, taken or printed PDFs done without any logging features, it just shows that we're trying to do this as proper as possible. So it kind of allows you to know where they are from a technical perspective. And in fact, we've had, parties on the other side sometimes have tools available and are able to authenticate it. So I'm not saying it's across the board that they aren't using proper tools, but it's a good thing to know on the front end from a strategic perspective. And then I think you asked, Alex, where we actually maintain the data. We're a Relativity 1 licensee, so we load it into Relativity. We sort of have different things saved so we could easily load what we have and produce out that information if necessary. I actually find, and it doesn't come up that often, but I would actually like to push out the production of page vault related metadata. And it turns out that that doesn't come up all that often, to be honest. Sometimes that might be because the parties that we're producing to are not as sophisticated, so they just want PDFs, so they don't need that. But then also, it just might be that we don't actually present all of that information in the load file. But the nice part is it's there and you can load it if you want to. So you have the information of this was done on this date, time, all the stuff that I'm sure we can get into. But those are some, I think, front end strategic decisions, and then also back end sort of where do you put it and how do you produce it, that I think you need to give some thought to on the front end of your case. And for better or worse, maybe there's a good transition, but for better or worse, it's we're in the same boat as Warren's firm, where we don't do collections. I mean, we've helped with some Office 365 exports, things like that, but we don't have forensic tools where we collect data. But we do self-service page vault, and not to, I say this as a positive because it's a good tool to use that's straightforward. So getting somebody up and running pretty quickly is something you can do, and the information's there to understand what you have. Whereas I think some of the downside of the different collection tools are that you need to be certified in a number of things and have to have done a lot of training, a lot of classes. And again, that's not to diminish the capabilities of Page Vault. It's just that there's some more capabilities that are available early on that you can use right away.
Yeah, awesome. Great, thank you, Chris. Okay, I mean, something you said right there, let's just first put it on the table. What's wrong with screenshots in the first place? I think that's a pretty common question that I get. It's pretty easy. We open up Snagit and we, click the button and it's done. What's the danger of that? What's wrong with that?
Sorry to, I feel like I just talked. So
no, go for it.
Yeah.
No, yeah, perfect.
One of the first times we used Page Vault was that we have a project assistant at our firm that wears a number of hats and is a great employee for us. But I remember we had an instance where it was like, well, I guess we can go first name. That'll be okay. Frank, you might have to sign an affidavit, and we got into the details of what Frank may or may not have done, and that was definitely an uncomfortable conversation, because all of a sudden it went from Frank sort of doing how things had been done before, meaning before we used Page Vault, to then we had a tool. And I said, look, to not put our employees in a bad position and to sort of not have to go through different steps, different ways, and what version of the computer were you on, all these different things, all that logging information is available right in the Page Vault in the first page of every capture we've done. So it was honestly a simple necessity thing. And frankly, I appreciate that Frank pushed back, because at first he thought, oh no, this is all of a sudden I'm gonna have to testify to what occurred and what did I do and when did I do that? Because for better or worse, for cases that go on a long time, we might not actually remember that a year and a half ago we did this, that, or the other thing. Whereas if you have your collections and they're done the same way most of the time, you can quickly look back at what you did, remember that's the case, and then confirm that in fact that's what you did to do the collection.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, I heard, largely having to actually be the one to go testify, write the affidavit. That's a big danger of using screenshots. Yeah. Warren or Wendy, anything else to add on what's wrong with screenshots?
I would just add, one of the first things I do when I see an incoming production or evidence being presented by the other side, and they are using screenshots or snippets of what appeared on their screen, and they don't even have the URL. I mean, you don't know who captured it. You don't even know where it came from, right? And they're presenting this. And so, and as professionals, when we are looking at these are the little things that we're looking for and looking at, and to determine whether or not we think this is good evidence that's coming in. So I don't ever want to be in that seat. I've had plenty of times also in the past where people have gotten a screen capture, and you've got an attorney that has written the brief and then now also is having to authenticate the screen captures that they've got, and it can get messy and it can be questioned. And so Page Vault eliminates that issue.
Great. Is Page Vault in the hands of everybody across the firm, or some tool like this in the hands of everybody? Like, are the attorneys, able to use this themselves, or do all kind of captures funnel through, in your case, Wendy, the paralegals, or for Warren and Chris, maybe?
Yeah,
discovery department.
I think at our firm, at least, the attorneys leave it to the paralegals. I mean, this is what we do. This is our wheelhouse. They leave it to us. They have access to it if they want to use it, but I'd say 99.9% of the time, the paralegals are tasked with the collection of the data. Definitely. I mean, we're also keeping some kind of a log of chain of custody and what we're doing and when we're doing it and when it's coming in, even if it is just directing Page Vault on a project that we need them to perform, and then when we get it back and what we're doing with it. So yeah, the attorneys pretty much leave it to the paralegals.
Great. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of similar for us. We primarily run everything through our group, our litigation support group. But we do have, a handful of users out there, both on paralegals and attorneys that are capable of doing it. It's less of a restriction and more of a if you're doing this on a regular basis, there's so many, like you said, there's so many different platforms and nuances out there with that. It can be a little challenge to ensure that you're getting an optimal output on anything. And so, if you're not doing this on a regular basis, it can be tough to not do it, correctly. So for us, we kind of run everything through our group, and then we would handle and use the appropriate technology or resource to make the capture.
Great, makes sense. And Warren, Chris, go ahead.
Well, I was going to I was going to say we do the similar thing as Warren and Wendy. I think the hard part, if you allow servicing of that outside of a support role, is that it might not be done the same way. Sort of, and we have sort of a little checklist that we run through when we're going to do this, and just to make sure that we're grabbing what we want to do. So whether it's a entire website that we're capturing, or if we're going to capture some from social media, our comments expanded. So the problem that we've had in the past is that if we allow servicing of this outside of people that are working in a support role, they might not capture exactly what we're looking for. And again, I'm not saying that we're perfect and that we do it correct 100% of the time, but it just makes sure that there are certain checks in place that are done. So I think it's something you could roll out more firm wide if you have that consistency. I think the hard part is that the nice part about remote work is that we can, don't have to be in the office every day necessarily. But then the hard part is that you can't just sort of walk down to someone's office, right, and say, hey, last time I did this, I did X, Y, and Z. Is that the same thing? So that's why I think rolling it out to just anybody to use might mean that you don't get the same consistent results, which could be, somewhat problematic. So sorry to jump in there.
No, that makes sense. That makes great sense. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from all of you is important to have it be used by somebody who does it often enough that they kind of know the ropes. They pretty much have understood how to use it, but can be more broadly used if needed, if somebody is doing this pretty often in their day-to-day job. Great. Warren, maybe coming back to what you said a few minutes ago, Latham doesn't do data collections, but then we're talking about how you and the rest of the support team is doing the collection. So what's going on there? Maybe we can go a little bit deeper into the chain of custody and kind of that line of discussion.
Yeah. So historically, we would, outsource to a service provider, and typically that involves like a 30-page contract to potentially 24 to 48 hours, for us to actually run through an engagement. For us, our clients sign the engagement, so there's a lot of parties involved. So you're essentially having to do this full blown contracting process to just utilize a single service, that you need, and so that was always a challenge, especially when you're getting a call on a Saturday that evidence needs to be preserved. So for us, it kind of removed that stumbling block for us, and so that was the main part, because we never know sometimes when how the evidence is going to be used. That was the other thing. Like, if you would get a call on a Saturday, I need this particular website captured, and need to capture it right away before they take it down. And for us, we want to do things the right way in order to preserve chain of custody. But then, your case team is telling, well, there's no case where it's pre-litigation, it's an IP related. We're going to be making a filing. But I'm like, you're going to use that filing potentially later on in discovery, and you're not going to be able to capture it back again. So why not do it right the first time? But again, you're fighting with the timing of things. So for us, trying to minimize as much risk as possible, because it's always about the what ifs and things that happen 6 months and a year down the road that you can't go back and turn back time. For us, once we came upon product like Page Vault, we were able to basically have a workflow in place that just it didn't matter. We didn't have to ask the questions whether it was going to be utilized in evidence. Do you need a half an affidavit or anything like that? It just allowed us to do it in a way that allowed us to comply with our general counsel's rules about no collections, and still have the ability to be able to capture and potentially authenticate, should we need to.
Great. And how come it complied with that rule? I know that's actually a pretty common rule I've heard across law firms, that you have to outsource for this type of thing. How come you're able to do it with Page Vault?
It's funny because that's exactly what people ask. They say, if you're not able to collect the data, but you're the one that's at the wheels using the tool to collect, why can't I just file print the PDF? The URL is at the bottom there. All that stuff is there. It's generally the same kind of output, and it's not exactly the same thing. So the tools, everything that we use is always vetted, at the highest level from our security and compliance groups. So the ability, I think, Chris, you were talking about the metadata that you don't know that you think you might need. It's all there. So the ability, because of the reasons of all that metadata and the ability to be captured, and it being a tool that was designed specifically to do this, it met those requirements for us to be able to say, yes, it is a self-service being handled, but it still meets all the requirements for not actually saying that we're doing the one that's collecting, because it's the tool that's actually doing it and generating the necessary work product to show that.
Yeah, great, exactly. And yeah, I mean, Page Vault, the original founder of Page Vault, built the tool essentially to keep the user out of the chain of custody. That was kind of in a nutshell, that was the goal here, to essentially make it all, you're directing the tool to kind of go make these captures in the background, so that it's not sitting on the user's desktop, whether it's during the capture process or during the storage process. It's all remote, all in the cloud. And so therefore keeping Lauren and Chris and Wendy out of the chain of custody.
And that's happened, right? Because if you hand over PDFs that you've printed, your name is going to be the author in there, right? Typically, you're not, if you're producing to someone who is savvier than you are in e-discovery, and you just print the PDF and you just hand those PDFs over, you're essentially providing evidence to the other side. And again, it doesn't mean that you've altered or done anything. It just adds to the distraction of the matter by having discussions and time wasted addressing those particular questions or concerns.
And I was just going to throw in one point on the third-party contracting versus just self-servicing when you're using it internally. I would say a fair amount of time we spend for non-Page Vault collections, right? So we're going to use a forensic vendor to do whatever we're going to do. again, it's usually not as timely to, meaning you have to get it done right away, right? We're going to coordinate that with corporate or whatever it is. But there is a lot of client coordination with that. And there's a lot of scrutiny around what that's going to cost, how long it's going to take. And all these cliches hold that in the grand scheme of things, the cost of the actual preservation collection of that stuff is sort of de minimis relative to the entire budget of a case. But it in my experience, there's a lot of scrutiny from that because the client understands that that's something they have to go through, and we need to get a lot of approval for that, which is, rightly so. I mean, that's their choice. I just find that having something that's plug and play and we use it, their clients are happy to do that and, don't have a lot of pushback on it. So there, some of this is just what can we get done when and how fast. That's a component for sure.
I can add a little something to that. I was thinking of, Warren had mentioned, it's a Saturday. I think it was a rainy Saturday in November, and I got a call about collecting some website information. And I sat down. I was like, okay, jumped in and using Page Vault, and navigating throughout the website and realizing what the attorney was wanting was voluminous. And my billable rate, now this is going to get very expensive for the client fast. And so I had a meeting with our team and I explained, look, Page Vault's great. It's self-serve. You can jump in at any time and anyone can use it, and it does a great job, but they also provide a service. Well, they'll do the collection and they use, they can do it so much faster, and it's going to save the client so much money. And so it's a given now on some of our IP cases. When we get started right away, I call up, the folks over at Page Vault, and we walk through exactly what I want done, how much of a website and any sort of unique aspects of that website, and I leave it to them. And they capture everything. They organize it the way I want it. I've got, it's all authenticated. I've got the declaration or the affidavit, and it's done quickly. And I've got my Saturday back. So that's been a key piece for us too in determining how we're going to go forward.
Great, fantastic. Yeah, that was going to be the next question. I mean, you have the ability to do these captures in-house with the tool or outsource them to Page Vault or other forensic vendors. How do you decide? And it sounds like for you, sometimes it's just the volume of the case, how much, how many billables you're going to have to rack up, how expensive that's going to get for the client. Warren, I know that you all at Latham kind of use the same type of mindset. You use some of the on-demand service, but you also use some of the tool. How do you think about that decision?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to ensuring that you have a process, right? And a repeatable process and documentation. So it starts off with that. We ended up creating afterwards a matrix for our group to be able to utilize. So not only is it a list of questions that we're asking the end user every single time, because people just say, I want to capture this, and they may not understand the functionality or the other options, like Chris mentioned about expanding out comments and things like that. There's a lot of that. So we've created an approach that allows anyone who's providing support for that to be able to have a consistent consultative intake process. And then after that, it's should you be doing this? So we ended up creating a matrix with exactly that, and kind of a choose your own adventure scenarios that allow to ensure not only the best tool and resource, but whether or not we're doing it internally or external, and present those options to our clients as well. I think we have one actually in the middle of quoting right now that you guys are doing that, where it's something that's an iterative collection that needs to be done, and allowing once we brokered that introduction from our end user directly to you guys, that they can now feed those links directly to without having to come through us. We don't want to be seen as a bottleneck, but we just want to ensure a consistent output. So usually that's what we'll end up doing as well.
Great. Fantastic. That all makes good sense. I want to talk a little bit about authentication. You all have mentioned kind of the affidavits that come along with this, but just for folks on the call who, may not be as familiar with all the details, what are the steps that you really need to take in order to get that evidence to be ruled as authentic and therefore admissible? And in particular, what is the role that this affidavit plays?
So for us, generally, I think our case teams are always looking to not have to go to court, right? So you're hoping that you're litigating your case and you're able to solve and resolve things during discovery, because obviously the trial process can be expensive. But in those situations, as you're approaching arbitration for trial, for us, it's usually the time that we end up having to make a callback. And get those affidavits as part of that, especially when the key evidence that we're using is any of the captures that we've done. So for us, that's been a great option, not having to need that up front, but knowing that we have it in our back pocket should we need to do it. I talked about not knowing where you're going to be in 6 months to a year, and not have to have somebody ask you now is how do we submit this? If depending on which court you're in or which jurisdiction, they may require that at the time. So once you're identifying, creating your exhibits and things like that, that's usually when they're asking. And again, nobody wants to focus on the challenges that you have to now go and authenticate something that you've generated almost 6 months to a year ago that may or may not even be there and available for you anymore. So that's been a valuable option for us, and not having to do that up front, and then not having to think about it.
Great.
For us, I'll just add real quick. We generally get an affidavit for some of the large collections that Page Vault does for us at the time that the collection's done, and we just hang on to it. I don't think we've been challenged at all. I can't recall off the top of my head ever being challenged. But when you're up against a summary judgment deadline, or you're in a deposition, or you're getting evidence on the record, you don't want to then have to say, oh, we're getting challenged on this, and we need to authenticate. How are we going to, and start backtracking? I just have it. I've got the affidavit, and I haven't had an instance where we've challenged any Page Vault captures either. It just seems that it's everybody's using it, and it's a great tool. But we've got it if we need it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then Chris, I know that you said you often maybe don't even go for the affidavit because of what Wendy just said. It's usually if it's a Page Vault capture, people will kind of respect that and not go the challenge route. But yeah, nice to be able to have it if you need it. Often, if kind of done correctly from the beginning, as y'all have been talking about here, sometimes then it can just kind of go through with or without it. Great. We talked a little bit as a group a week ago about the Wayback Machine, and how they're actually now offering an affidavit service so that the Wayback Machine can be used as evidence. Does anyone have any kind of other thoughts of how that might affect whether or not they're using the Wayback Machine, or anything you want to discuss there?
Historically, go ahead, Warren.
No, please. No.
I was just going to say that we do use the Wayback Machine. I go through Page Vault to capture the Wayback Machine. Whatever content that we've needed. I have not yet used the affidavit off of that's I think now available through the Wayback Machine. I think Warren maybe has more information on that side of it.
Yeah, no, I think similar to us. I mean, historically, that's what we would do. It's either collect it and not worry about it. We've never run into a situation where we had a Wayback Machine collection challenged, but there was an article circulated within our firm about a court, and that was not accepting that. So while the Page Vault collection can be authenticated. At the time, I think the Wayback Machine was not offering that because nobody could authenticate what their process was. And I think, at some point they did make the switch to be able to offer an affidavit. And I think it just, underscores the importance of not only the Wayback Machine, which, you know, like Wikipedia and all the other sources of information that are out there that we take for granted, but it's such a repository of information that I'm really for one happy that they're offering it, because now you're not going to be in a situation where you know, you won't be able to utilize evidence that is out there.
Yeah, definitely. No, I was happy to hear it as well. Yeah, I think it, like you all said, kind of best practice there. Wayback Machine can change if somebody asks it to. So capturing the Wayback Machine with some web capture tool, I think still continues to be best practice, but then you can get an affidavit both for the capture tool as well as for the Wayback Machine, just to make sure you're fully buttoned up there. And then, you know, we've been talking a lot about it, but just to be crystal precise on it, the federal rules of evidence, I think are really what dictates this whole emphasis on the affidavit process. FRE 90213, evidence that is self-authenticating, should include a certification of a qualified person. And so that extra piece, whether it's from the Wayback Machine, whether it's from PageVault, of being able to have that affidavit in your back pocket can really make sure that the challenges are very few and far between. Fantastic. We have about 5 or 6 minutes left. And so my final question for you all, for anyone out there who's in the earlier stages of setting up their web collection, web capture processes and procedures, what are the most important tips or tricks that you would give them? And what common mistakes would you suggest that they avoid?
I'm happy to lead off on that one. So I think Wendy gave a good analysis of what you can handle in-house versus what you need to potentially reach out to PageVault for. So I think maybe leaning on PageVault in the beginning to help with that. And honestly, I found PageVault support to be very helpful in the sense of both getting you up and running, but then also deciding what's something we can handle internally versus externally. I'd say a couple like tips and tricks that have been helpful for us. I mean, one is like super simple, but resizing the capture window. So we were capturing a lot of Instagram stories, and the real estate on the page that was being used was pretty small. And when we sort of resized the window such that, I mean, it seems silly, but such that the capture window got almost the entire page was the story itself. That was like a simple win for us, because at first, if there's a lot of text on a story, you almost can't make it out. So I think doing a little bit of trial and error to make sure that what you're actually looking for is actually being captured. And again, is kind of, I think, simple, but when you first start out using it, is good to then know if these actual captures are useful, because I can't say that I look back at every capture every time I do it, but obviously I feel more comfortable now the more that I've used it. Whereas in the beginning, when I was doing captures, I was checking like every page and almost like going side by side. Like I remember I had a professor in law school that he joked about how he checked contracts. He would hold them up to the light, like each page. Well, you can't quite do that on a large website, right? Like it's hard to make sure that all the content is captured, but it is good to, double check so that most of it's in fact there. So those are a couple simple ones.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris.
I think that, like I said, start early and collect often and do it right from the get-go. If in litigation, you know about litigation hold and you know about preservation collections of documents or data that's in your client's possession, custody, control. But there's an entire world out there, social media, that can change over time, and I don't think people often think about that. I think sometimes they rely on, it's on the internet, so I can go get it anytime. Well, just like text messages on a cell phone, it might change, it might disappear. Somebody might take a website down or take their Facebook page down, and so being a little bit more mindful of the dynamic nature of data that's out there on the internet and identifying it early and getting it collected in the correct way is going to be, critical at some times to the outcome of your case and what you're trying to demonstrate did or did not happen, or something that did or did not exist at any given point of time. You know, and the other thing is oftentimes I'll see, not often as much anymore, but you know, somebody's relying on a URL to demonstrate some content on a website, and so they just plug in a live link in their briefing. Well, this litigation is about something that happened 2 to 3 years ago, and so what purpose does this link serve us now? You know, this is what it looks like now, but you know, we don't show us what it looked like before. You know, so. I think that's one of the things to try to avoid, is just thinking that whatever's out there today is going to be out there next year when you are in discovery or motion practice or eventually going to trial. And also, you know, making those early determinations as far as what that content looks like and whether or not it's going to make sense for your client to have PageVault perform the collection. We've saved our client thousands and thousands of dollars by doing the most efficient collection process and utilizing PageVault. It's a super easy tool to use. It's quick, but they also have some further services that are available that we've relied on heavily.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wendy. Lauren.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would caution everyone is, if you're at a company that does not have or dictate a collection or no collection policy, I would operate as if you not allowed to make collections. So, I think our role as e-discovery professionals and experts should be that we're trying to reduce and minimize risk for our case teams and ultimately for our clients, and that this is just one simple thing that you can do to ensure that your discovery never becomes a distraction for your case teams.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This has been, I've learned a lot. I'm sure our audience has as well. So just a huge thank you for being here today. If anybody listening in has any further questions about online evidence collection, please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, email me at alex@page-vault.com. If you have any questions for the panelists, feel free to direct them towards me, and I can filter them through as well to get some answers there. We have recorded this session. We'll send it out to all the registrants within the next day or two. And just hope that this has been helpful for everybody. Thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, guys.